from uh, the primates are surprised. They stared at it, they looked at it, they were shocked at it. And in the next scene, you can see they are making something with the objects and then uh, gaining supremacy over the other group. So, and subsequently, the film develops, and there is evolution, and there is spaceships and all that. But the film has two aspects. One is the attraction towards the unknown object, the thing which we call in philosophy. It's still unknown, uh, and the fascination stays throughout the film because the monolith stays throughout the film, unchanged. It appears in the beginning, it appears at the end, where the uh, scientist is about to die and he finds the monolith standing in his room. There is no explanation given by director, and people have speculated on it, what to make of it. But and on the other side, there is a technological dystopian future. He imagines that at some point of time, technology will overtake us, and so we'll find that both fascination and suspicion towards things exist in that film. And this film very rightly portrays our whole attitudes or emotions towards things, and how we have struggled with them and how we have charmed by them throughout history. And within these two emotions, the paper argues that the whole history of the humanity, or we can say precisely what I'm going to speak about, the history of the West has unfolded. So, and I will give, it's both a historical analysis and also as a contemporary analysis of things which have come. And I will try to find whether the contemporary events have a history, genealogy with the past, and or whether we can say that they're just disparate events having no connection whatsoever. So I will give 3 or 4 examples of the present scenario to highlight this situation of suspicion and fascination with the objects. So the first is, I mean, we all have seen the queue when the Apple launches its iPhone. We have seen the queues. People are standing outside for 3-4 days just to get a glimpse of that first set. It's just an object in the modern parlance. It's an electronics device which can be used for, but we are not, an object cannot move us that strongly. People are waiting, and the people having money, I mean, affluent people, they wait for 2-3 days just to get a glimpse of and to touch it on the first day. So this fascination, but at the end of the day, we'll explain that it's just a mobile phone. But that doesn't explain our fascination with the technological objects. The same with the cars of Tesla. I mean, people go crazy over it. So this is the secular realm I'm talking about, where technological objects are merely technological objects. The second example I would like to give is of the bombings of Palmyra. I mean, few years back, you must have seen televised across the world how Palmyra, an ancient site in Syria, was bombarded by ISIS. And it was it was not a new event. I mean, we are used to watching these events. The Bamiyan Buddhas were the recent examples before that. So it didn't struck me that it's something new. It has happened in history. But what struck me was an archaeologist whose name is Professor Khalid Al-Assad. He was in charge of the antiquities at Palmyra. And he has given his entire life managing the statues and the relics which he discovered at Palmyra. And literally, he was a kind of dedicated, he spent his whole life. So when ISIS asked about the details of the hidden antiquities, he refused to divulge it. As a result of that, they beheaded him. So I found it quite interesting that an archaeological object or museum piece or a heritage, it's just a heritage in the modern parlance, can evoke so much reaction or so much sympathy towards it that we are ready to give our lives for it. He was beheaded and he didn't divulge the details. I don't know what happened to them after that. no news of that. But it shows that, and the Palmari is the site where uh, history. So the Palmyra is not new to devastation. Catherine Nixie, in her brilliant book *The Destruction of the Classical Age*, describes how the hordes of marauders destroyed the statue of Athena. But that was at that point of time. It was, I think, you can make sense of it because the religious zeal was so that you can't tolerate the. You can interpret the things in that way. But what happened in 20th century, because they're just they're not living gods, they are just artifacts with arms and pieces broken, and yet it invoked the fury of the isis. So and Catherine Nixie gives a very beautiful paragraph describing how the I in initial stages when the early Christianity was in progress, how they destroyed the statue of Athena. I will read out the passage. The destroyers came out from the desert. Palmyra must have been expecting them for years. Marauding bands of bearded, black-robed zealots, armed with little more than stones, iron bars, and an iron sense of righteousness, had been terrorizing the east of the Roman Empire. Their attacks were primitive, thuggish, and very effective. These men moved in packs, later in swarms, as many as 500, and when they descended, utter destruction followed. Their targets were the temples, and the attacks could be astonishingly swift. Great stone columns that had stood for centuries collapsed in an afternoon. Statues that had stood for half a millennium had their faces mutilated in a moment. Temples that had seen the rise of the Roman Empire fell in a single day. So, and this the same dress code you can just out of coincidence, you can find the same dress code wearing blacks. I don't know what there is a connection, but repeating that event after 2000 years on the dead objects, on the statues, on the heritage, you can say. So, and the and these are the two events which I wanted to, or three events I wanted to narrate. How even when the life is sucked out of the objects or things, we still don't lose our uh, fascination or the so-called hatred towards that object. And within this two emotions, we can frame or I can consider iconophilia and the iconoclasm. Between these two poles, I will try to uh, uh, locate this paper, and I have taken two uh, contemporary personalities, uh, the shopper and the bomber. Basically, the bomber is a you must have seen the images of suicide bombings on the television. So I will take you from anthropologist Talal Asad. He has written a brilliant book on suicide bombing and how it invokes terror in our and what are the causes. And also I will make use of Faisal Devji's book, The Landscapes of Jihad, to explain that phenomenon. Whereas the second aspect will be the shopper, which is a generic term for consumerism, which we understood. Uh, and Bruno Latour in his book, I think on first day, Bruno Latour also was mentioned about how things have agency and how they can be mediators and they have a life of their own. So I will use his distinction that how modernity is responsible for creating a gulf between subjects and objects, and how uh, in search for purities of categories, it has renunciated the whole list of existence out of the framework of living entities, and uh, this has resulted in proliferation and innovation, which has simultaneously choked the landscape. So I will I will go forward with this and say that these two events may look different. They may have one belongs to the secular realm and other can be labeled as religious fanaticism. But the task of the paper is to find a common ground, and the common ground I think extends beyond the modernity's division of subject and object, uh, and is to slightly far back in history. So I will trace that similarities to an event which has been described by historians as the period of axial age, when a lot of things, a lot of spiritual revolution was happening in the world, where all the mediating agencies, all the uh, we can say the adambar of the religious sphere was given away, abandoned for the spiritual realm. And scholars have called this period as axial age, where Buddhism, Confucianism, Zoroastrianism, and Jewish rose uh, in prominence. So I will try to see whether these two events have any, or I will try, these two events have a common genealogical uh, background, whose poles are basically fluctuating between iconophilia and iconoclasm. So for this, uh, I'll start with what we the main epochs of history as described by Western historians, which is the axial age. So axial age basically uh, is an expression of you can say that uh, when we say that all the mediating agencies, all the mediators have uh, no active agency. They do not influence us, and they are an abstraction to the absolute reality, which is God. Because at that point in time, God was the highest figure that could, uh, highest truth. So the multiplicity of the mediating agencies or the gods obstructed the uh, 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 untarnished or supreme idol, which is the God in the singular. So with that, I think scholars have pointed out that actual has two ramifications. One is it elevated morality to the level of metaphysics, which Nietzsche also talked about. And the second is that it mainstreamed the act of iconoclasm, that all the mediating agencies, or we can say that all these smaller gods whose statues act as a medium or are no longer valid. They are basically in obstruction to the truth. So, and so they have to remove. So it, in a way, uh, standardized the act of iconoclasm in the historical trajectory of the Western world. Uh, so, and it's also part of the theology also, when we say that uh, uh, the prophet Abraham destroyed the icon shops of his father, saying that they are false, and why you are worshiping these things. So it's kind of a part of the theology and history also, both. Where can chef it out from each other is not possible, but you can get a sense that it forms a criteria of truth finding, that you have to remove the obstacles or the things which are obstructing your view. Uh, but at the same time, the other tendency, it's also visible. Whereas few when the story of the Exodus, when the Moses went to the mountain and his people were left behind, they were feeling, I mean, deserted. So they asked the Aaron to construct a golden calf so that they can worship it. So you can say that these two emotions are not excluded from any sect. It's they're both part of that. So in the initial phases, when in the iconoclastic surge, you can deny this existence of mediating agencies, but over the course of time, when things stabilize, you have to accept that you need something to move through to maneuver a landscape. So the story of Exodus and the creation of the golden calf by uh, Aaron signifies that fluctuating emotion between how the initial iconoclastic rage of Abraham gave way to the iconophilia of the Aaron. But subsequently, when he came back from the mountain, he destroyed the golden calf. So, and the history moved forward. Similarly, we can see with the history of Christianity in its zeal, when I just read out the passage, it destroyed the icons and statues of the world, gods. But when it stabilized, it also created its own, uh, the statues of Jesus and the statues of Mother Mary in the course of time. Because uh, in the initial fury, you can do away with the mediating agencies, but when you have to stabilize, you have to need things which can anchor you on the ground. An impersonal idea is sometimes uh, impossible. An impersonal idea is very insufficient to hold the people or to make people uh, gaze through the worldly uh, worldly existence. So you can see the whole idea of iconography. So iconography developed in the Christianity to a very high level. So when they did away the 3D figures, you can see there in churches and all these walls, frescoes, very beautiful paintings developed to express that subtlety, to express that intangible aspect of the existence. Uh, and the middle century is considered as the epitome of the religious painting. The Nicholas of Cusa is a very good example how religious painting itself was developed. Uh, Similarly, with but the source remains the same. So the source that informed the initial iconoclastic fury remained the same. So when Christianity stabilized, another sect came in the form of Protestantism that did away with all these images. It said that it's all false because original source, original message is the book only and is the word, and we have to interpret it and you have to read it, and that is the only way to. Uh, so you can see that again when iconophilia takes over, another wave of iconoclasm takes over from that. So uh, within these two poles, the whole history of uh, West, or you can say the Christianity, has followed. So the point is, scholars have then argued that in the Middle Ages, how science, the classical science, developed in a struggle with the religious beliefs. But if you look at the history of science, you will find that science itself was trying to find the same answers which religion was trying to find, the idea of a single truth. So if you see the initial scientists, Leibniz, Pascal, Newton, all, you'll find that they were all concerned with the grand design of the nature, which contained the laws of the God. So this wave of iconoclasm destroyed with the book also, that there are no revelatory books, but mechanical uh, order where, and there is a cosmic design where things go by rules, and it is the will of the God basically. So you can see that throughout history, uh, subsequent, you can say, Eric Vogelin has coined the term immanentization, a progressive amending of the things which inherit from the past. So with the Protestantism, the rise of capitalism is well associated with. Next Weber has written about it, how Protestant ethic was responsible, or you can say facilitated the growth of capitalism, because it has a works ethic different from the Catholic. But in its approach, it inherited something from this Christianity or early Christianity, which was the idea to find a single or a single truth, or the motive of iconoclasm that carried forward. So when when we shift from Protestantism to capitalism, and then innovation, and we come to the idea of what is called the consumerism, or the inconsistent or the indiscriminate shopper. Basically, because it is attracted to the objects, but it lacks the coordinates to make sense or to integrate it in its lifestyle. I think James Clifford has in his book has written very beautifully about the predicament of culture, how we are constantly searching for new artifacts, new objects, and how we are not able to make peace with them. Our shells are loaded with different esoteric, exoteric items from different parts of the world, but we are ready to change it for a new esoteric and exoteric items without impacting our lives. So in a way, we are a compulsive shopper if in the secular realm. We don't know how to integrate or how to look back, how to stare at the object for long, just the way the chimps in the movie Stanley Kubrick's did in the beginning. Because when you stare at, when you look at an object more closely, it reveals to us its essence, not in terms of its use value, but also in terms of its essence. What is what is the essence of that, and how it will form part of our existence. So consumerism, to my mind, or the personality of shopper has its lineage in, uh, uh, it may appear modern, but and it is modern, but it has its lineage in the Western history, which I have tried to course. And the second one, it's the realm of iconophilia. And the second one is, I talked about the acts of suicide bombing. It's an other extreme of the same process, which of iconoclasm, which we have seen throughout history, how uh, once the religion stabilizes, and a sect emerges or a rage emerges, which tries to undo all the settlements, all the things, all the vegetation that has grown on it, and it creates a clean slate so that we can. Okay, sir. So these are the two aspects which I'm trying to uh, uh, explore, and these are still initial stages, but uh, and what is the way forward? I think archaeology has now realized the importance of things, because certainly a few days back I read a paper where there is an archaeology of dementia, where things, objects and heritage are used as a therapeutic instruments, where people with dementia, people who are living alone, people who are suffering memory losses are are given the task of handling the heritage objects and artifacts, uh, and it gives them a kind of relaxation, or a kind of peace, in handling them. So it's not just for dementia. I think the whole humanity, or in the humanity in general, has to make peace with the forms. Otherwise, we will fluctuate between these two poles of iconophilia and iconoclasm, and on whose consequences, which of which we call as ecological crisis, or uh, global terrorism, which are both, in my opinion, or not. I'm still in analysis, but in my opinion, the part of the same lineage, which is the fascination and the suspicion of the objects. Thank you.